Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Here at Di Paso. Today we will be diving into Black Myth Wukong, the game that came out like 2 weeks ago or something like that, that is making seriously big headlines into the gaming industry. I'm pretty impressed for what I've played so far. I'm having a ton of fun. The game is very ambitious, it's visually stunning, and brings a fresh experience to action games overall. But with like everything, it's not without its flaws. So we'll be diving into the good, the bad, and everything in between. Alright, so what's Black Myth Wukong? You play as a monkey warrior, clearly inspired by the legendary song Wukong, and the game itself is inspired by the Chinese novel A Journey to the West, and it's an action RPG basically. But let's clear things up. It's not a Souls-like. It's more like a combination of Souls-like with something like God of War, honestly, on the way the game plays and the storytelling goes. It's more something like that. There are some similarities to a Souls-like game, like the bonfire, where you rest and where you can normally expand your experience points into unlocking other abilities and so on. You can still do that here, but the way the game is paced is quite different. This one is way more faster, and it's more focused on expanding something called in-game focus points and making very satisfying combos. Okay, let's dive into the combat. Let's break it down a little bit more. Your bread and butter attacks are light and heavy strikes, but the real key is managing your focus points. You build up focus by landing attacks, dodging well, or charging up for a short time. Once you got enough, you can pull off powerful heavy strikes that can stagger enemies or deal a ton of damage. And, if you time it right, those charge hits feel so satisfying, especially when you're pulling off dodges and combos in quick succession. There is also focus on stance switching, which adds a bit of depth to the way you approach combat. The staff can shift into different forms, whether you are doing heavy slams for max damage, or hopping onto the staff to avoid incoming attacks while preparing for a downward strike. It is all about choosing the right stance for the right enemy. And while it can be a little try and error at first, because the game doesn't hold your hand, once you figure it out when to use each form, it adds a lot to the flow of the combat itself. Now let's talk about the boss fights, because this is where the game really shines. You're going to be fighting a lot of bosses, seriously. The game feels like a big boss gauntlet sometimes, but that's not a bad thing. The variety in design, mechanics, and sheer scale of these encounters is impressive. You're not just fighting rescuing enemies like over and over again. Each boss feels unique, from their move to the way they challenge you to adapt your strategies. Whether you are up against massive creatures or humanoid fighters, the game keeps things fresh by constantly switching up what you're up against. There are some mid bosses that hit just as hard as the main ones. Like, man, seriously, I cannot believe how many times I've been killed by some just random guy there in the street, just like that. And man, some of these fights can be a real spectacle. You'll be dodging huge attacks, pulling off perfect counters, and just barely scraping by. It really nails the feeling of tension and relief that you get from a well-designed boss encounter. If you're a fan of difficult but fair battles, this game will keep you hooked. But it's not all action all the time. When you're not locked into a boss fight, you'll be exploring the whole world. It's amazing. And this is where the game can feel a bit more hit and miss, honestly. The environments are gorgeous, whether you're running through a bamboo forest, trekking through deserts, or battling through snowy peaks. Black Myth nails the art, designs, and atmosphere. The lighting, textures, and general vibe of the world are top notch, especially with the ray tracing on high-end PCs. And all this footage you guys are watching, it was recorded on a PC, on my personal PC, using a RTX 3070. So there are a lot of reports coming from a lot of people saying that the game has some performance issues, but I guess it really varies depending on your hardware. That said, the level design itself is pretty linear. Sure, there are a few branching paths here and there that lead to optional bosses or materials for crafting, but overall, for the most part, you'll be following a set route. It's not exactly a bad thing, especially if you prefer more focused progression, but Don't expect a sprawling open world with a lot of freedom to explore. And I gotta mention, there are a few invisible worlds that can break in the immersion a little bit, which is a bummer when you are in these beautiful design areas, honestly. But you know, overall, it's not something like a big deal or anything. One of the coolest features, though, is the shape-shifting. You can transform into different creatures after you have defeated them, adding a lot of to the versatility to your combat options. Each form has its own unique abilities, and you can use them strategically depending on the fight. It's not just a gimmick either. These transformations come with their own health bar, giving you essentially an extra life when things get tough. For example, early in the game, you take down a giant wolf, and from then on, you can transform into that creature, using its fiery glaive to burn enemies and pull off combos. It's not just about dishing out damage either. Some transformations give you the defensive advantages to help you deal with specific enemy types. Mixing this with the staff, multiple stances give you the combat and level. Now, let's talk about the technical side of things. Graphically, this game is stunning, especially on PC. The environments are beautiful detail, with flowing rivers, dense foliage, and lighting effects that make everything feel alive. It's a rare case where a game that was initially teased as a graphical powerhouse actually delivers on that promise. The textures, shadows, and even the characters' models are amazing and fantastic. But as great as it looks, there are some technical hiccups. I did experience some stuttering and frame drop, especially in the more hectic scenes with lots of enemies and effects on the screen. There were a lot of crashes here and there, and while it didn't ruin the experience for me, it's something to keep in mind if you are sensitive to performance issues. If you are playing on PC, it might be worth waiting for a patch or two if you don't have a top tier rig. Honestly, the game came out like 3 weeks ago or something like that, so maybe it's okay right now. So yeah, just keep in mind. Now let's touch on the story. Black Myth Wukong pulls a lot of from the Journey to the West, but the game doesn't hold your hand when it comes to the lore. If you are familiar with Chinese mythology, there is a ton to appreciate here. Characters, settings, and themes are all deeply rooted in that cultural tradition. But if you are not, you might find yourself scratching your head on some of the references. So I really recommend going, and if you haven't checked maybe the novel, maybe just check a summary or something like that. There are plenty on YouTube. The story itself is fine, but it's definitely not the game's strongest point. You are mostly moving from one area to the next, taking down bosses, with a few cutscenes and characters' moments sprinkled in it. If you are expecting a deep, emotionally driven narrative, like, you know, something like God of War, this might not be the game for you. But if you are here for the ride and to soak on in the atmosphere, there is a lot to love. Honestly, you will have the time of your life. So, to wrap things up, Black Myth Wukong is a flawed but impressive action RPG. The combat is fast, fun, and rewarding, especially when it comes to the boss fights. The shape-shifting mechanics adds a cool twist, and visually it's one of the best looking games I played in a while. Sure, it's got some technical issues and the story might not hook up everyone, but if you're a fan of action games with a bit of challenge, this one's definitely worth checking out. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you like it. What do you think about Black Myth Wukong? Are you excited to play? Have you played it already? Or do you already beat it since it's like 3 weeks already? Are you planning to pick it up anytime soon? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and if this video helped you out, hit that button and don't forget to subscribe for more reviews because, you know, video game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.